You're listening to the Business Communicators.
This last week, we also saw companies make some pretty huge mistakes. And one of the companies was Pizza Inn. And you might be wondering, why are we talking about Pizza Inn on the Business Communicators podcast? Well, they decided to insert themselves into a conversation in which they had no business getting involved in. And on Tuesday, I think it was January 5th, they issued a press release via PR Newswire, which cost $2,800 to be able to issue a press release on that platform. They sent a release weighing into the election and voter fraud. And they said, quote, "Millions of Americans believe that widespread voter fraud may have changed the results of the presidential election. We believe this is probable, but the fact that we can't say for certain is what concerns us most." They go on to further say in the press release they are not constitutional scholars, but then proceed to give 6 things that they would do to change how we vote in this country. What the hell was Pizza Inn thinking?
That they didn't have enough pineapple for their pizza. Who knows? They weren't thinking clearly, that was for sure. I think what gives me pause is that for them not being saying they weren't an expert in this particular area and then proceeding to tell folks how it needed to be done. So many parallels to, were they playing a part in this whole week's chaos and cray-cray that went along too?
I looked at their share price information, and their parent company, Rave, they are a publicly traded company. They had been delisted twice in the past 6 months by NASDAQ, and their same store sales for the last quarter fell 22%. And I know that the general restaurant industry has been hurting, but takeout and delivery like this hasn't been hurting. If you look at their competitors, such as like Papa John's, which we discussed earlier in season 3, their same store sales are up 20% during that same time period. So I think this was a publicity stunt that just, the timing couldn't have been more awful.
And I saw the same news about them getting delisted off the NASDAQ. And the reason they're delisted is because their share price fell below $1 and it stayed there for a long time. And so I have no doubt in my mind that this was a publicity stunt trying to get some quick wins to get it above $1 so they weren't delisted. And then I also kind of quickly just Googled just now while Austin was talking about where they're located. Pizza Inn isn't necessarily a big city pizza chain. It's in the small, and I just only made it through Texas to where they're in the smaller towns. So he might be trying to play to his base or their customer base for those rural areas. But again, I think that Pizza Inn at the end of the day was trying to increase their share price to above $1. And that was the whole reason they did it. I don't think it worked. I know it didn't work because they're still not above $1 and they still got delisted. And it looks like it's still falling. So it's probably going to fall even more because of this. So it's a complete miss.
Yeah.
So is it safe to say they're going to go out of business?
It's plausible. They might have to file for bankruptcy. I mean, their share price as of January 8th is trading at 89 cents. I mean, it's not good. But one of the other issues that I had with this whole situation is there was a Dallas-based PR company, Champion Management, that had Pizza Inn as their client, and they approved. They sent the press release out to PR Newswire, and I'm questioning that from an ethical standpoint. You know, we've got the IABC Code of Ethics, which says that members must communicate accurate information and promptly correct any errors. PRSA's Code of Ethics says that we must convey the following on honesty, that we adhere to the highest standards of accuracy and truth in advancing the interest of those we represent and in communicating with the public. So take that note, in those that we represent. So that means if you're a PR agency and you've got a client, you still have to follow those ethics. When you've had 60 court cases say that there is no voter fraud, and none of these court cases have gone anywhere, and you still send out a press release, whether you wrote it or not, you still send this out, you're culpable at the end of the day. I think one of the issues that I also have is that this is a day before all the violence in DC. So I think both parties, in my opinion, are somewhat to blame for peddling conspiracy theories that help lead to people rioting and destroying federal property this past week in Washington, D.C.
I agree on that. They are complicit. At the same time, don't try to backpedal out of it at the last minute. And that's the whole thing going on. Even, that past week, things went wrong. People start backpedaling, trying to distance themselves from the situation because whatever they tried failed fast.
Yeah, sometimes you take a risk like a publicity stunt and it backfires in your face. To me, it blows my mind. And Thomas, I know you were trying to jump in there.
Couple things. First off is we're in the First Amendment. I've mentioned earlier in this podcast about certifications and licensing and etc. But there's no hard, fast rule that a PR firm or an advertising firm has to be a member of the reputable organizations, whether it's PRSA, AMA, AdFed, IABC. And so do they really have to follow those guidelines? The answer is really no, but should they? Yes. But then also at the back end of it, running your own company, there's a whole lot of back and forth that goes from there. I don't know what the firm's billings are, and if Pizza Inn or Rave is a small percentage of their billings or a large percentage of their billings. And then also, there might be some sort of opt-out clause, because if you're hiring a PR firm and you have a PR firm on retainer, they're there for crisis management. And so you don't want them to be able to say, without cause, we're gone. And so I think that at the end of the day, the owner of the PR firm needs to really sit down and look at their portfolio of business. Do they have the right mix? Do they have the right ethos? Do they have the right clients they're going after? You hear so many people saying we're not going to take the sin stocks, the tobacco, alcohol, firearms, petroleum, etc., blah, 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 blah. But should there be some sort of clause that if you don't listen to the advice we give you, we're firing you on the spot as a PR firm, not just as the client firing the agency.
Yeah.
So without having the full back end story, I my heart bleeds for the owner of the PR firm, but at the same token, he should have known better.
Yeah, I agree.
He really should have. He's the owner of a PR firm.
You have to set your company up for success, because at the end of the day,
he's paid a lot of money to make those decisions.
Right. We discussed the Richards Group earlier this year and why their mistakes cost that company millions of dollars, potentially put jobs at risk. I was curious about Champion Management, a little bit about their firm, and according to their website, their values say that the company, quote, won't represent a client whose products or services we don't believe in or that are detrimental to the good of society. So I wanted to reach out to Lad Bureau, who is the principal and founder of Champion Management, to get his take on the situation, to see if they had any regrets. I asked if they were still partnered with Pizza Inn, if they were still a client, if they supported their work in the press release. And I did get a statement back from Lad. I'll go ahead and read that right now and put it up on the screen. But Lad said that at Champion, we pride ourselves on being an indispensable partner to our clients. We strongly counseled Pizza Inn against putting out the recent press release. I personally warned that it would backfire on the brand and potentially disenfranchise half of its customers, and that Brandon, the CEO of Pizza Inn, would likely be polarized and in the media. I also shared my opinion that they would be stoking the flames of a very divisive issue at just the wrong time. I was not successful in my argument. He went on to say that I considered refusing the directive from a longtime client, but in the end, we put aside our personal beliefs and fulfilled our responsibility as their agency partner. In hindsight, this was a mistake. We should have refused and taken the risk of being fired. We have since terminated our engagement with Pizza Inn and disassociated ourselves from their views on this issue. And then specifically on the IABC and PRSA Code of Ethics, Lad said that the release accurately states Pizza Inn's position on this issue. It is certainly not Champion's position, but our job is to communicate our client's position. He also said, since we have terminated our relationship with Pizza Inn and disavowed their position on this issue, we have no say in any potential retraction. What are your thoughts?
He had a Pence moment. Mike Pence moment. I have no doubt that he regrets what he did. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt on that. However, it's unfortunate that he was unable to influence the client. I don't know what his relationship is with the client. It seems like it goes further than just being professional for him not to be able to get them in. And he didn't refuse, but they quickly backpedaled after the fact when the storm hit. I'm disappointed in how they handled it, but I don't wish them any harm or anything. And I hope they're able to regroup and recoup. So we'll see.
The thing that gets me is their name is on the press release. Anybody can put out a
contact,
press
too.
release on the newswire. And so while he might backpedal and reading, as Austin read their mission, vision, values, code of ethos, nothing does it say dealing with a owner who's going to try to go off the reservation a little bit. Last I checked, pizza still falls into the good categories of businesses to do business with. Yeah, I wish them the best. I hope they're well. Googling their website, it looks like they've already pulled pizza in off their website, and it does look like that they have a fair amount of business still into it. Looks like they actually specialize in restaurants, so that makes it even more entertaining.
If you look at their website, also it says that they don't deal with jerks. They said no jerks or junk. So I don't know. I understand they made a mistake, and we're not about cancel culture here. We've all made mistakes. We've got to own up to it. Our point of this podcast is to discuss how we would do things different, how we would approach something in this scenario. We understand that we don't know the contract details. There might not have been a way that they could refuse. I will just say this: if you are a PR agency, you've got a client that you significantly disagree with, and you know that it could be a potential reputation risk for that client, it's also a reputation risk for your company as well. You're putting your company and your employees and your staff in the crosshairs at the end of the day. I think that this should have been outright refused. I kind of agree with Hattie that this is a Mike Pence moment, that this is a hindsight is 2020, that we were called out and we regret doing it. I think that if you are confident in your firm, you've got to be able to put the foot down and say no. And I think that falls on leadership. And I was actually curious how other companies would have handled the situation, and if any other companies have gone through a similar situation. And I reached out to a mentor of mine and asked him, basically the same questions, like, what would you guys do in this situation? And he responded, we actually just fired a major client a month ago for getting us into an ethical quandary. We would never advise a client to take such action, even in the spirit of being provocative. There are long-term, long-tail implications to such activities. We practice, quote, do no harm communications. We have passed on dozens and dozens of clients. Oh, it just clicked out. We have passed on dozens and dozens of clients over the years that they wanted to use us to smear competitors or venture into gray areas of truth, which I think this was a gray area of truth, 100%, this press release. It's one reason why we don't take on political candidates as clients, for example. Our reputation is our currency, and nurturing reputations is our trade. If you knowingly betray the truth, you won't get as far as an agency. Like the Richards Group example, which was unfortunate, taking such measures also erodes culture and behavioral standards from the inside out. The wrong talent thrives and the good talent leaves. Lastly, many of our agent brethren have their hands forced because of the relative importance and revenue concentration of one client. If it's the bulk of your business, the ethics bar could possibly be lowered. You have to manage the portfolio wisely to avoid giving a client too much power over the agency. He also said that one of his mentors said to him before passing away that you have to figuratively or sometimes physically grab the client by the shoulders and tell them, this is wrong. We will be on the losing side and our agency won't be a party of it. I hope you respect or understand our relationship enough to get that. I thought that was incredible. I thought that was very measured. It was a peek into how this person's company handles situations like that. I think that Champion Management should have had a backbone. And I understand they made a mistake. I understand they regret the mistake. I understand that they've separated their partnership with Pizza End. But you've got to have a backbone to stand up for your ethics and your corporate values.
I agree. And practice do no harm communications.
You know, I'm going to commend the person you reach out to and the agency that they're operating like a not a First Amendment, not a communications firm, but as a real business driver, business relations, everything like that. One of the startup companies I work for, I'm actually in the process of interviewing attorneys for contract law. And so having to do the due diligence on the back end of it, and reminds me of a video I saw literally last week of one of them, you know, on their little FAQ thing. And it says, what happens if one of your clients asks you to do something illegal? And they said, it's in our policy that we fire them immediately on the spot. And it's the same concept. What happens if you ask us to do something unethical? We fire you on the spot. There's no gray area to that point. And so I commend that. I think as professionals, we need to always be trying to do what's best for our client, what's best for society, and not necessarily in that order. Just it's you can't have one without the other. Period.
Yeah. I do want to say that I commend Lad Bureau for, you know, reaching back out, giving us a statement, and owning up to the mistake. I think that is admirable of him. I just hope that, you know, they can keep that in mind moving forward, that sometimes your reputation matters more than anything else, and you can't associate with companies that are pushing conspiracy theories like this. You know, it's the same thing of, if you get in a car and you know the person driving is drunk and you don't do anything to stop it, even if you weren't driving and that person got in a wreck and hurt somebody, you're still responsible. Like, you legally, you might not be responsible, but at the end of the day, you could have stopped something. You could have stopped something bad from happening. So my advice to Lad is, again, thank you for giving us that statement. Pause and think, moving forward, what is best for my company? What is best for my people? What is best for my reputation? Don't get into any situations like this that could lower your credibility as a company.
Well, I'm not going to give him any advice because he looks like he's old enough to know better. However, again, I do agree, thinking before doing something. And I don't know what he was thinking. He trust your gut. He said he had a gut feeling. If you have a gut feeling about something, don't do it.
I'm going to give him a little bit of praise, just because during the whole Richards Group thing, we said, as an agency, as an advisor, it's a bad news day when your name is more of the story than your client's name is. And outside of us being professionals, I don't think many people are tying the dots between his agency and Pizza Inn. So whether that's because the media got distracted with something way bigger, taking over the government, or if it's a very strategic play, I'm only commending that he's not the story outside of us very targeted professionals who can read between the lines. So you Google it, it's really hard to find that from his agency released the press release. And again, it might be dumb luck, might be planned. It's just a happy coincidence on him. And so I'm going to give him a little props for that.
We're going to tell him he's shrewd.
I do think it's a little bit of luck. I do think it's a little bit of luck because the press release ultimately was pulled from PR Newswire. You can still find it on a few different publications, but yeah, I do think it's a little bit of luck, especially because there was a major event, a huge event that impacts the credibility of our country that happened less than 12 hours after. So I think that kind of helps. It's why my alma mater, Baylor University, sent out a press release on Super Bowl Sunday a few years ago. It's because they knew people weren't going to be talking about it. But sometimes you see press releases come across the wire and you kind of raise an eyebrow. This is one of them. And I think with the events that followed the very next day, that just exacerbated it, in my opinion. I think that if nothing would have happened in DC, people wouldn't have talked about it. We wouldn't have spoken about it on this episode. But I personally believe that if you are peddling conspiracy theories, you're part of the problem. That's my take. Take it or leave it. I don't care, Republican, Democrat, whatever, independent. That's my take. If you're peddling conspiracy theories, you're part of the problem. And don't be a part of the problem, be a part of the solution. Let's move forward together as a country, especially as once we get to the inauguration on January 20th. I hope we can do that.
You've been listening to the Business Communicators.